Hi, how's it going? Hello. So yeah, I'm gonna be watching an interview with a lady named Posie Parker. If you're not from the UK, you probably won't know who she is. She is a public figure, really only known for being virulently transphobic, as you can tell, so yeah. So this channel, Triggernometry, it's been suggested to me a few times, but I've never really managed to finish anything they've ever put out because, well, you'll see. But, let's just go. Come on. Trans women aren't women. Convince me, Posie.
Well,
because that is important. Would you?
Oh.
Do you feel vindicated?
Okay.
I feel like a prophet.
So the hosts of this are ex-comedians. They market themselves as centrists, but in the UK that basically means you are socially conservative and economically conservative. I did look into them a little bit. They're very strange guys. I really can't get a grip on their positions other than I think they're like pro-Russia, maybe kind of Nazbol types. Let's see.
And welcome to Triggernometry. I'm Francis Foster.
I'm Konstantin Kisin.
And this is a show for you if you want honest conversations with fascinating people.
I think it might be pretty fascinating and honest today
Can't
because
wait.
we have a returning guest. It's Kelly J. Keane, formerly known as Posie Parker, who holds the record for the most number of views of any of our previous interviews. She's very happy about it. Kelly, welcome back.
Thanks very much.
Well, I mentioned our previous interview. You're obviously a women's rights campaigner. And the first
Cancel
time we had
culture
you on,
is a
we were
myth
talking
in the
about
background there
trans
with
issue. This would have
Stalin.
been at least 2 years ago.
Interesting.
And just to set the context for everybody, and you won't know this, but I do remember when you walked out, the interview's titled Trans Women Aren't Women. When you walked out, Francis and I looked at each other and went, okay. And then we had to put our testicles back on to actually, in the comedy industry, very progressive. For two comedians who were still operating in the comedy industry, very progressive. We were recording it above a comedy club where we
I don't know about that.
on the goodwill of the people there. That was terrifying.
It was borderline suicidal.
Yeah, that conversation was absolutely terrifying.
Nice shoes.
And I want to get your take on it, but I think that one of the reasons
If these guys are progressive, then it's going to give you a good idea of what things are like here.
They're possibly putting forward arguments, some of which are well thought out and some less so, perhaps, just pure ignorance. And someone is pushing back with facts, with arguments, with logic, without being upset, without getting angry. There's a bit of humour involved. Everybody has a good time. That sort of was the vibe of it. What was
having a good time, just
your feeling when you walked out of that conversation?
Having a fantastic time.
It was good. I quite like the opportunity to answer an argument and have a debate. It's not as productive for anybody, I don't think, if everyone goes, oh, yeah, I agree, oh, we all agree, isn't that great? Well, and it's much more entertaining for everybody else, isn't it? But I think in order to really present a good
by the way,
argument,
I haven't
you
seen
need
this.
somebody
I watched
that
a couple of little,
agree with you.
a couple of little bits of it earlier.
Yeah, it was great, wasn't it?
Because at first I wasn't going to do this, but the bits that I saw I had to.
We feel like to death, and I think.
It is true they have covered it a lot, but only from one angle.
Know where we stand on it, and that's partly, let's be honest, thanks to you, because you did open our eyes to a lot of stuff. And one of the things that you were saying at the time, I'm not sure how persuaded we were by it at that time, was the slippery slope fallacy isn't always a fallacy, and if you allow certain things to happen, well, guess what? 2 years later, you might have a party conference of a major political party in this country, where Ed Davey, the leader of the Lib Dems, Keir Starmer, the leader of the Labour Party, now essentially, today Keir Starmer is saying we need a James Bond to be a woman, but 2 days earlier he couldn't even define what a woman was. Yeah. That's where we are. So
how is that a slippery slope, dude? That's not a slippery slope. That's just linear.
I did know that if you can't name what a woman is, you can't
Okay.
really say anything about us. You can't defend our rights. You can't defend our spaces. A female space is no longer a female space if there's a man in it. So
Female.
I knew this was coming.
Lovely
I kind
T-shirt
of
there
hoped
and
it
blazing with
wasn't,
rhinestones.
But I think the writings on the wall from everybody I know who's got anything to do with the Labour Party, and let's not forget that the Tories are in charge and they're not doing very great things either. The Liberal Democrats are...
So by not great things, she means that they're basically just ignoring the issue. Because realistically, if she was in charge, things would be a hell of a lot worse. Let's just say that.
I mean, if it wasn't such a serious issue, it's hilarious. I mean, they're doing very great things either. The Liberal Democrats are...
Lib Dems.
I mean, if it wasn't such a serious...
Lib Dems are doing literally the bare minimum, and they're so far down the polls that it literally doesn't matter. I think last time I looked, they were basically neck and neck with the Green Party, who, must be said, are an explicitly transphobic party to the extent where their leader stepped down because of it this summer.
Issue, it's hilarious.
Like, she was pro, and she decided that she just had to leave.
I mean, they're just proper way out there.
Way out there.
How have we come to this point? How have we
So
come
far
to
out
the
there.
point where on a major political show, Keir Starmer, when asked what a woman is and do women have cervixes, essentially failed a year 5 biology question?
Okay, so I've seen the clip that they're referring to, and yeah, Keir Starmer doesn't give a great response, but like, what do you expect? He, like, a bag of wet bricks would be a better party leader than him. Yeah.
I don't know. There must be such a powerful minority in the Labour Party that he just can't speak.
Are you kidding?
Because it's too ridiculous to think that there's any rational kind of lead up to that. Emily Thornberry, she was asked the same question and she said that her nephew is trans and he has a cervix. Now, I don't agree with her at all. I think that's a ridiculous thing to say. But at least there is, you can understand if you've got a niece, I would say a niece.
Yeah, if you're personally affected by something, you're probably going to end up being more empathetic to other people who are affected by it.
Who identifies as trans, and you might not want to really offend her. So that's a little bit more understandable. But David Lammy thinks that trans men, also have a cervix, that when you have SRS, you end up with a cervix. I mean, it's like...
Okay, so that's not exactly what he said, but what he did say was pretty buffoonish. But I think, like, at least he was trying to do the right thing. Like, he was trying to be nice, he was trying to be good. But, like, just ridiculing him because he doesn't know the intricacies of MTF bottom surgery, like... You know, if only it were acceptable to, like, talk about these things without withered hags wailing at you saying you're literally eroding the moral foundations of society and trying to have them killed and whatever. But, you know, then maybe people could actually learn about what's really going on and the things that are actually involved instead of just being too scared to say the wrong thing. And he's also a boomer, so, like, what do you expect?
All I can think when I see David Lammy is him saying there are no police here with a police officer behind him.
It feels like neighbourhood policing has vanished. It's not around you. We haven't seen a police while I've been here, and I've been here for a little while now.
That's just balmy.
And it must be
whatever.
these very, very powerful activists.
Whatever.
But surely they can't have that power, or do you think they're just worried about being cancelled, smeared, etc., etc.?
Well, I think they must have power. I think power is the only thing that could persuade normal, rational humans to say such ridiculous...
The desire for power, maybe, but, like, the Labour Party is not a pro-trans party. Like, they're just not.
things. It can only be...
And, like, I can understand people on the left of the Labour Party trying to like virtue signal to progressive people in order to try and just get any votes they can. But I mean, that doesn't make it right, but
Power to
It's what they're
force
doing.
people to
Well,
into
sort of.
newspeak. I don't.
yeah, sure, Newspeak, okay, George Orwell, 1987, Animal Farm.
It's not rational, is it?
I wonder if she's actually read that.
There's no truth. It's not factual. So it can only be sort of levers of power.
Well, it's become a bit of a purity test. And the first time we were having that conversation, I think the sort of tension that was in the air was because we are two people who are genuinely intellectually curious and try to be honest.
Really?
But also that pressure from the industry we were operating
Interesting.
within at that point of time was coming into conflict. And I think a lot of people find themselves in that position, including in the Labour Party, where on the one hand, you do want to be honest, and also you want to be compassionate. That was the other thing that was certainly motivating
Do you?
me, and it motivates me to this day. I don't want to.
I've seen the kind of videos you put
do
out.
not have an easy life.
seen your
They
Twitter.
don't, right? For the sake.
Although that guy is like literally anti-vax. He tweets about anti-vax stuff. So yeah, very compassionate, very intellectual, very honest.
Of some kind of argument. But at the same time, I think we're seeing now that when people pretend to not know the things that they know, it has consequences in every area, whether that's, you know, there's a new transgender fighter in MMA who's choking people out, whether that's Laurel Hubbard competing and taking the place
Laurel Hubbard didn't win.
as a woman.
Shut
or
up.
Whether that's detransitioners now coming through. You're seeing lots of young people who are saying, I was basically led down the garden path and now I've chopped bits of my body off.
Well, sucks to suck.
Without necessarily being
That was a bit mean.
fully present to what I was doing. There's consequences to this.
There are massive consequences. I sat in the second day of the Keira Bell appeal when
Oh,
the
here we go.
Tavistock said, no, but we do want to give kids puberty blockers, which was a peculiar
who the
thing to
f-
sit there thinking, me, the tax...
Who the f*** else are you going to give them to? Do you know, like, hello? Hello?
taxpayer funding the Tavistock to insist upon actually giving kids puberty blockers. And one of their barristers
Yeah,
was talking
duh,
about
that's what they're for.
the autonomy of 10-year-olds and the agency.
Yeah, children are people. Like, I don't know if you know this, but like, children are people.
Of a
Oh, so I worked for the NHS in the pediatric department for 4 years, so I'm ready. I know what I'm talking about.
10-year-old to make that decision. Sitting there, and Keira Bell's in front, and she's brought this whole case, and even though she did...
Yeah, but she was used by people like you.
lose...
Like, you took advantage of her and her pain to use her for your own ends. Maybe not you specifically, but people like you.
that particular bit of the whole ordeal for her, she's open conversations globally. So whatever happened in that courtroom, she totally won, and it was incredible. But to listen to... And I watched the 3 judges, and one of them was like the Chief Justice. There was another Master of the Robes, and there was another one, the female, who I can't remember what her role was.
A female.
But she was jolly
Female!
good. Jolly good.
She looked good, and she
Yeah,
said,
she
"Don't."
looked great.
Yeah.
And so the 3 of them, and at no point I was expecting at least a flicker of something and an inquiry into, really, these are children. How far is this going to go? And
What are you talking about? They won the case at first. We'll get to it.
nobody was asking those questions. It was insane. So
What questions?
in answer to your question, I can't remember what the question was.
Well, I think it
Fantastic.
was less of a question. I actually do want to ask you this, because we talk about the slippery slope not necessarily being a fallacy. We've seen that with the trans issue. We've seen that with COVID restrictions. You know, people who were
Here we
saying
go.
things a year ago were called conspiracy theorists. Now those very things are happening. What do you think is coming?
If they start
given
talking about gain of function, I'm going to lose it.
what you're seeing, because you mentioned Labour Party, Lib Dem, but also the Tories not really doing very much on this issue. Where is this going?
Not killing trans people.
Well, the Tories have got
Although they are. They literally are.
a few people, I think, who could really turn the tide. It just depends how much of a grip Carrie Symonds has on Boris's
Yes.
career.
What?
It's not a
What?
euphemism. So it just depends how much of a grip the woke have got on the Conservatives. But where is it going?
None.
Well,
They have
just
none at
mandated
all.
the sort of consent for 12-year-olds with vaccines.
What are you talking
So
about? Yeah.
I think it could go to some really, really dark places. I think
Wait, what?
there's so many little things that have happened, right?
What are you talking about? Do you have a HPV vaccine, Posie Parker? Because they give that to 12-year-olds. I mean, like, when I was young, they only gave it to the girls, and they should give it... that might have changed now, hopefully. They should give it to everyone, I think.
Do with parents and children.
But yeah, vaccines for kids. All children have tons of vaccines. It's a non-argument.
And I'm a mother of 4. And
Are your kids vaccinated? If you have daughters, do they have the HPV? What about MMR?
the little things like we're not allowed to know what they're doing in sex ed, or you're not allowed to take them out of...
What? I don't know about that, but when I was in school, my parents were pretty aware of what was going on in those kind of classes.
the bullying lessons, which often include things that I don't necessarily would, I wouldn't have wanted my 7-year-old to be talking about.
You don't want your 7-year-old to know what bullying is? I'm so confused.
So there's severance there. There's severance in the relationship between parents and children when it comes to consent for vaccines. In Scotland, the NHS has sent 51 girls, I think, to... they called it something euphemistic, but basically having their breasts removed under 18, 51 girls.
What?
So I don't know.
Source?
Is it an attack on reality? Is it a severance of family? Are all the people who've been saying that there's some sort of crazy Marxist takeover
Jesus
happening?
Christ.
Are they a little bit right? Yes?
Socialism is when no breast, apparently. Redistribute the breast, please. Please.
The thing, there's several things about this issue that I find disturbing, particularly the use of language. Someone very, very, very close to me is looking at, for medical reasons, having to go through a double mastectomy. And reading up about it, and we've sat down together, and you're looking at the medical literature. This is a very, very problematic, invasive procedure. And then when you hear other people talk about it, these activists, they go, oh, it's just top surgery. And you think, no, it's not top surgery. This is a major medical procedure.
Okay, so 51 teenagers aged 16 to 17 who were born as female were sent to hospitals in England to undergo further assessment for specialist chest reconstruction over the past 6 years. 17 can undergo the procedure. Okay, but that's not what she said. Does she have any idea how long the waiting times actually are? Like, literally? Does she know?
Why are we using these frivolous terms?
Well, there's loads of frivolous terms, aren't there? Sex worker for prostitution, where you get away from the harrowing ordeal of being like a street prostitute if we call them sex workers. And I think it's the same with top surgery. The other thing's called bottom
It's an umbrella
surgery.
term.
Then there's... I don't really know what...
They're umbrella
getting
terms.
breasts. But yeah, this...
Wait.
and there's getting breasts.
Wait,
I don't
what?
really know what... and there's getting breasts.
Okay, whatever.
But yeah,
Moving on.
this need to disguise what's going on. Like there's non-binary surgeries now. So non-binary surgery might mean that you have your testicles inverted to create a cavity, but you would keep your penis.
I'm
Girls
pretty
who
sure
call
that's
themselves non-binary
not how it
because there
works.
is
Is she
just an
referring to an
insane war on breasts.
orchiectomy? But that, if she is, that's not how that fucking works. Yeah, that is not how that works. I have no idea what she's talking about. You invert the testicles to... She doesn't have any clue what
And
she's
I don't
talking about,
really
does
know
she?
what this is about. But you'll have a scar from there to there, and you have your nipples removed, and you just... And there's also, I think somebody called it mermaid surgery,
So?
where you have quite a lot of things smoothed out, like your genitals smoothed out, and you just end up with a urethra. So there's it's so gross that if you talk to somebody
She's giving it away. She's just disgusted. That's it. That's all it is. She's literally just disgusted. She has no arguments other than just like, ew, gross, kill it with fire.
who knows nothing about it,
You know nothing about it.
they will not believe a word you say because it's so insane.
And it's insane, and we seem to be sacrificing our children. That's the thing that really
Sacrificing
blows my mind, because
children.
surely, isn't it every parent's instinct to protect their child?
Well, you would think so, right? Like if my child had said to me when he was 4, I'm a girl, the start and end of that conversation would be, are you? That would be it. No drama, no
Wow.
nothing. That would just, he'd forget about it, I'd forget about it.
Okay. Okay.
His child wanted to wear... So basically he wanted a towel around his hair after a shower like she did. And she said, you can't have one. And he said, I'm a girl. And so what she did with that, she thought about that all night long. And then within 6 months, that kid was transitioning. And it's women, it's people with vaginas.
Bodies with...
Bodies,
Let's use the correct
sorry.
medical language.
Oh
from the
my
line says
God.
Bodies with vaginas.
So funny.
That are more likely to do that to their kids.
Right.
Now, I've thought
Yeah,
about
I have
this
no
really
idea what
hard.
she's talking
I don't
about.
really know what that is about.
It's all
because
just
I find
anecdotes of
that would go
people that
against every
friends of
instinctive
friends,
part
you
of my
know.
body to allow something like that to happen to one of my children. But it is women that are more likely to do it to their kids. Men are more likely to just bring their autogynephilia into the family home.
What?
Which is the fetish of wanting to be a woman.
What? What?
More likely to do it to their kids. Men are more likely to just bring their autogynephilia into the family home, which is the fetish of wanting
What
to
the
be a woman.
does that...
But
What
no,
is that
he's,
supposed to mean?
It's women.
What
It's
is she
women
saying?
doing it to their kids.
Yeah, because dads are assholes.
I've been saying it
No, I'm just saying.
for years. No.
Are you tired of using bulky...
Fuck off.
That means... Address the other side of this conversation, as we did last time, which is
Oh, this should be fun.
none of us here are people who want anyone to be suffering or anyone to be discriminated against or treated badly.
I do
and
not
this is
believe
an
you.
area where the rights of different groups come into conflict, right? That's why we're having this conversation,
Yeah.
right? So, and I appreciate that you're very strongly on one side of that discussion. But how do we not lose our humanity in the process of this and not dehumanize other people when we're talking about it?
You're going to ask her that? Really?
Well,
Because that is important. Would you agree?
No. No, she would not.
totally. It's not. Look, it's not. If somebody doesn't bring their identity or whatever into my space, if it doesn't conflict with my rights, do I care?
What? What are you talking... What? Ah!
Space. If it doesn't conflict with my rights, do I care?
How can you say you don't care? It's literally all you care about. Like, it's literally all you do.
Not very much. It's when that person's identity, well, it's not even, it's such a silly word, identity. It's when that person's wants and desires become something that I have to deal with. I don't want to deal with it.
You
I
don't.
don't
Just shut the fuck up and look the other way. Just Just shut the fuck up.
Think it's any of my business. Don't make it my business.
Yeah, it's not.
Don't bring it in
No one
into
is.
my kids'
You're making it your business.
schools. Don't bring it into my changing rooms, my female-only space. Now, the dehumanising element,
Whatever.
it depends how far we want to go. I feel it's quite dehumanising to say that any man can be a woman. I think that totally devalues and dehumanises what it is to be a woman. But I
What is anything? Like, literally, what is anything? Like,
don't think people would say that that was dehumanising. Whereas if I say that
how is it dehumanizing, though? Just how?
that person is a man, I should be able to say that person is a man. As a female, I understand that that person
Why should you be able to say that? Why do you care? Again, you say you don't care, but you clearly care a lot. If it's like upsetting you that much that you...
is much more of a threat to me than a female. Now, that can be from
I see.
flashing or just looking at somebody. Now, you lovely gents, you prostate havers, you probably haven't had those sort of exchanges which most women have since basically you get breasts. And so the moment that you sort of turn into a woman, and sometimes even before, there's a lot of kind of uncomfortable staring, and that informs the way that most women feel about men. And I don't think that means that
Fair
every
enough.
time I encounter a bloke, I think, oh God, he's a pervert. He's probably a rapist.
It sounds just like that's how you feel.
I don't feel like that at all.
But if you're saying that, like, trans women in female spaces make you feel unsafe because they're men, then you are saying that you feel unsafe around men because the way they've treated you in the past, which can be, like, totally valid, but you don't get to be a prick about it.
But I can definitely feel creepy men,
Yeah.
you know? And I think women feel it
But
much
women
more.
are vulnerable to men in certain situations. It's just a fact, right?
Yeah. And go on, Francis.
One of the things when people talk about, the toilet issue not being an issue, this is the argument that someone presented to me, and I don't really think there's a counter-argument to it, which is in a nightclub situation, every woman has experienced there's a creepy guy who's following her around, who's making her feel uncomfortable. Where's the number one place she heads to in the nightclub as a method of escape? She goes to the female toilets. That is a safe space. If that is obliterated...
What do you... Gee... my brain...
She's got nowhere to go.
I know. It's I was lucky enough to go on holiday this year, and I'd just come back.
So all of their arguments are just like, you, gross, trans women and men, shut the fuck up. Like, that's all it is. That's all they have. That's literally all they have.
And we went for a McDonald's breakfast because we are classy. And we went into the McDonald's, and I went to the loo, and I'm in the cubicle, and a man comes in, right? Does not speak in English, seems to be in quite a rush, pushes open the door. I promise this is what I did. I just went and just didn't breathe. I didn't my instant response, it wasn't a rational thing. I just didn't breathe until he'd left. Because him in that space totally changed that space. Now, I wouldn't have felt like that if it was a woman's voice. And so, for some reason, we're having to pretend that isn't how we feel when we hear a man's voice. And it's not, like I said, it's, I'm married to a lovely bloke, but no matter how desperate he was for the loo, he's not going in the women's toilets because he understands how women feel about men in their space. It's why most men would cross over the road and not walk behind a woman walking on her own.
And do you think most women feel like that, or do you think it's just the way a certain section of women feel?
I think most women feel like that. There's a book by Gavin de Becker called The Gift of Fear, and it talks about your body basically will respond to something quicker than you will, and you'll feel it. So that's like my holding my breath.
I don't really have much
Now,
to
what I
say
could
about
have
this
done, which I think
section.
now what a lot
Again,
of
she's
women
just
do,
kind
is
of
they would
self-reporting that
rationalise it and
it all
start
just comes
reasoning
from
with that instant
fear.
response.
Like,
And they would rationalise something that should probably make them afraid and will protect them. And I think that is happening really scarily with this younger generation of women, where they're not allowed to trust their emotions at all and their instincts. They're being told that they're mean,
What?
they're unkind.
What?
And so I think it's really quite dangerous. I don't know a single woman that wouldn't feel afraid in a public toilet, for example, if a man came in.
Well, that makes perfect sense. So
does it? What?
come back to my compassion point, though.
Okay.
Yeah?
That's what
I
they were
do wanna
talking
explore that
about?
Because of all the questions.
That's literally what they were talking about. How to keep the conversation compassionate, and she went on like a 5-minute thing about how she's terrified of all men.
Questions that I've now answered for myself. That is one I'm still struggling with.
Yeah, and I
You
see
don't
that.
strike me as a bigoted person or as a nasty person at all. A lot of people think
Wow. This guy's got an amazing judge of character.
you are, though. And I know now why that is, because you refuse to bend on things that matter, right? That's why people consider you a nasty person, because you say it like it is on a subject that most people are very uncomfortable with, right? That's why. So, but I think we all ought to, and I think we all try to actually, have compassion at the same time. So how do we, the language and the conversation seems extremely polarized. Is there any way that this conversation can be had in a more healthy way, or do you just feel like it's a war and you have to win?
How can I put this?
Because in a war, compassion is not a virtue; it's a vice.
Yeah.
Right. You
Yeah.
have to win.
Well, I do feel I do have to win.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course you do. Of course.
Because what is at stake is
So she, again, admitting that she has no compassion for people on the other side. She doesn't want to have a conversation. She just wants to beat people around the head with her ideology.
phenomenal and just horrific. So, for example, the word woman. I was in a meeting the other day, and women who would call themselves feminists, like proper radical feminists, use the words female people instead of woman. Now, I can only imagine the reason she felt she had to use female people is because the word woman would sound too coarse, too forthright, too exclusionary, and so she didn't use it.
Exclude who, though? Because if she's saying female people, is she referring to people who are, like, stereotypically, like, female sexed?
Now, the reason we can't talk in terms that you maybe feel...
Or is she just describing an interaction with another TERF she had? I don't understand what's going on.
It doesn't show any compassion is because we've lost some of the words that we should be able to use for this. Now, I think a man that can't
Like
go
what?
out or just feels that he needs to live as something else, whatever that might mean to him. Do I feel compassion for any human who... I think they're probably wrong that will end their suffering, but who am I? You know, of course I feel compassion for everybody, but my compassion is so used up by the women that will lose their rights, lose the ability to,
What
to
rights?
be able to say at work. Actually, I don't really want Janet using the toilets. I felt really uncomfortable. Or the woman that wants to remove her hijab
Why
at
not?
lunchtime
Like,
and wants to go in the loo to do it, and she can't do it anymore because she can't guarantee that's a female-only space. Or the teenage girl who goes in a changing room, in a toilet, in a communal changing room, or where there's communal parts to a female changing room, and there's a guy who, I don't know, I think we used to call it indecent exposure, who's bravely getting his female penis out in the changing room.
this basically never happens. Like, if you've ever spoken to a trans person, you'll know that they don't just go waving their genitalia around. A lot of them are probably pretty terrified to be even look at themselves in the mirror naked at home, let alone go out in public. It just doesn't happen. She's just making shit up to play off people's emotions.
My compassion is fully spent.
It should happen, and it shouldn't be a problem, but I really don't think it happens very often.
On women and girls. So I'm not inhuman. I do think that all human beings should have equal access to equal rights, but not at my expense.
No, you don't. You just said there, you get rights so long as it doesn't inconvenience my ideological belief. As long as my feelings aren't being hurt, but you're always going to go out of your way to find things to be hurt about when it comes to this, because you're driven purely by disgust. So...
And you say not at your expense. What's going to be the end game, do you think, if you don't? If you say that the war is lost, if it is a war?
Look where we are. We've got rapists in women's prisons. Let's look at America. So America is, so I sell merchandise and raise awareness, and I've sold merchandise to a quarter of the countries in the known world. So I think it's quite a global issue for women. 25% of all my stuff goes to the USA. In America, in Californian prisons, there are pregnant women who have probably had pretty awful lives in the prison population, who are impregnated by other women that are in the prison population.
Source? That's like one case. Like, it's an edge case. It, again, basically never happens.
Those women aren't allowed to know. So they sleep about 8 in a room in American prisons. Those women aren't allowed to know that there's a man coming into their prison cell. And there's also men going in with HIV into women's prisons. And that person's human rights to not let anybody know they've got HIV completely supersedes the women's rights to know that somebody is coming in with HIV.
What the fuck does that have to do with anything?
Could be there. We could be where America is, where they slice off the breasts of like 13-year-old girls.
That does not happen. That's a lie. You're just lying. It doesn't happen.
At 15, you can do it without your parents' consent in Oregon. We could be like Canada, where they'll take your kids away if you don't affirm their so-called gender. I think Jordan Peterson said about the compassion thing, is it ultimately compassionate to lie? And I don't think it is. I think a really brave, kind thing, and, you know, like I say, I've got kids. The kindest thing I do for my kids is not necessarily give them what they want. And I still love them and adore them, but, you know, if my son wanted to get up every day and have like a 200-gram bar of chocolate for his breakfast...
So I can't see anything about this Oregon thing. I can't find any primary sources. But I feel like she might be lying. Oregon quietly enacted tax benefit policy that allows minors as young as 15 to undergo surgery without knowledge or consent of their parents' origins. In 2015, Fox News published... go away. The age of medical consent is 15 or older. So, yeah, I'm going to say that that's probably a lie, and if it's true, it's probably never happened.
I'm going to allow him to do that. And that would be an act of
Yeah, like everything she's saying that I'm like looking up on the side, the only things I can find are like distinctly biased right-wing news sources written by people like her. No actual evidence. It's all just anecdotal.
Kindness and compassion.
Where I found this ideology starting to encroach more and more, not into our lives, because I think we can all agree that we all live pretty weird lives when you consider what we do. But when I talk to my friends who've got regular jobs, and all of a sudden now they've had to tell people what their pronouns are and how they want to be addressed. And you see that in very liberal media circles, like in the theatre, where at the start of the rehearsal, everybody has to announce their pronouns.
Really, though? Does that really happen? Because I lived in an artist commune for 5 years and nobody ever announced their pronouns, and some of them were some crusty anarchists. Like, I just don't really believe that this happens. Like, I just don't believe it.
But it's also coming into the corporate world. I can tell that you're not going to agree with this. Why do you disagree with the whole pronoun thing? And
you mean like people at Starbucks having their pronouns on their pins? It doesn't mean anything.
having to announce it?
I think it's quite weird. I think, I mean, what do people want? Like, clearly, this is what I went to a feminist meeting a long time ago, and I did my first like Facebook Live, and they sort of wanted pronouns. Now I look like this. I'm 5'1". I'm quite clearly a woman. If you don't know what my pronouns might be, then you're a bit of an idiot. And I just think it's asking people to...
So that's the imposition on your rights, being asked for pronouns, if that even happened at all. That's the big,
It's very sneaky. It's saying, come into this ideology. Nobody really needs to know. I mean, if we're all supposed to be equal, like if we were in a truly progressive place, then would it really matter what anybody's pronouns are or how anybody identifies at work?
That's the point. That's the point. That's why they're asking. So that it stops being a big deal. To normalize it.
I mean, does it mean that you can't do John's accounts on a Friday if you're a they, them? I mean, it's just...
Well, I mean, you're a lot less likely to get hired.
I've got friends who work in places where they have to wear the rainbow lanyard and they hate it. They don't want to. They want to just go to work. You know, not many.
I wonder why they hate it.
Absolutely adore
I
their
wonder
jobs.
why.
They do it because they want to actually have a life and pay for their mortgage. You know, there's not too many people skipping to work and going, damn, 5 o'clock on a Friday, damn, I wish I could just work the whole weekend. These are our places of work.
What are you talking about?
They're not places to encourage us to be ideologically insane.
Do you think this is really
So
where we
work
are?
should
And it
be
applies to
miserable?
much more than just the trans issue.
I don't get it.
We've just, for some reason, I don't really understand why, I've decided that the point of all aspects of society is to do social engineering. The police is not about policing crime, it's about social engineering. Civil service is not about running the country, it's about social engineering. Comedy is not about making jokes, it's about social engineering.
Well, wow.
Every aspect of our society now, wherever you look, it seems to be that social engineering is the #1 priority, and the actual function of that organization seems to be secondary, at the very least.
The art of manipulating people so they give up confidential information. I don't think he knows what social engineering means. I mean...
If I believed in massive conspiracy theories and I was China...
Also...
engineering is the #1
police
priority,
should not
and the
have
actual
pride
function of
flags
that
on their cars.
organization
They can
seems to be secondary,
right
at the very
off.
least.
If I believed in massive conspiracy theories and I was China, right, I'd love this right now, wouldn't you? You just place all these little things like, oh, let's not help them think about like long-term financial...
So... trans ideology is a Chinese psy-op to weaken the foundation of the Western world?
solutions that are going to make the poorest in the country
Is that what you're
more
saying?
wealthy. Let's not do that. Let's make them all talk about gender.
you
Let's make them all talk
serious?
about racism.
What?
Let's do that. I just, if they found a troll farm that was more deadly than COVID, I wouldn't be surprised. I just think that kind of is the only thing that really does make sense. That the information war
What?
upon us, and loads of
What?
these things, they're not real issues, are they?
What?
The real issue is not being able to buy a house in your like mid-20s or 30s. I just talked to
She's so close to being right. There you definitely is, like I was saying with the police, there is definitely some kind of level of recuperation going on where, and a guiding of, a trail of breadcrumbs in order to just keep people satiated, to stop them from realizing what the big real issues are. And not to say that, all of this isn't a big real issue, because it is, but yeah. So now she's an anti-capitalist? Sick.
a lovely taxi driver. My parents were both manual workers. They got married as teenagers. Within 3 years of being married, and they had 2 children by then, living with my grandmother, they could afford a house. And like my dad literally sorted sheepskins they both did very well. They both worked really hard. And my mother cleaned offices because she had small children. They could buy a house. When I was a little girl...
Yeah. Things are shit now. This is all we've got. Let me have my fucking pronouns, you
Teachers were well off. They were the people in the nice houses and the brand new estates. They had big houses. Now, I think that's the whole replacement thing. That if you think about these kind of ethereal, ideological things, you're not really thinking about, actually, my life's pretty bad. I've got no...
Again, kind of agree, but I don't think she cares about any of those things. At least she doesn't care about them at all compared to how much she really does care about, making sure that trans people don't get rights. Again, she's just talking shit.
Control. I'm never going to be able to afford to buy a house. I'm never going to be able to leave this job. My rent is so high, which means I can't save for a deposit. All of those things are really, really
Been there,
important.
girl.
They make a difference. Workers' rights. So in this country...
You think the Conservatives gives a flying fuck about any of that? Labour don't care about any of that. No, none of the political class give a fuck about changing any of that because it's all set up to benefit them. Like, what are you saying? You're just deflecting now. You don't care about any of these things. You don't. Because if you did, you would be doing something about it.
We've got the Equality Act, and I was looking into it to see whether or not
Oh,
we
Jesus.
should just totally get rid of it and start
You
again and
fucking
have
serious?
separate, like a Disability Rights Act. for
What?
example. Because I think that really is important. Just to go on a tangent, trains may be emblazoned with pride flags, but most people with disabilities have to plan a journey like months in advance to make sure that there's someone to meet them, and half the stations don't even have... You can't even get off a train
disabled people
onto a
get treated
platform.
like shit as well.
Nobody cares about that. It's much better to talk about
But what's
minority
that got
rights
to
of
do with...
LGBT people, which I have no idea what rights those people don't have in this country.
Are you fucking serious?
And now I've forgotten where...
Oh, of course you don't, because you've never actually looked into it. You've never actually talked to anyone about it. Because all you do is just see people on the street, assume that they're trans and have this visceral gag reflex. And that imposition on your rights gives you the right to go and be a massive fucking cunt about it.
where I've gone with my tangent.
Well, actually, you were making, I think, what is a very profound point, which is all of these distractions and the conversations we have about all of these issues.
So civil
which are
rights
much
is a
more intellectual than
distraction
practical,
from...
are a way of giving us all something to chew on mentally and to try and control in a world in which we increasingly control less and less, have less and less...
Oh, so they're just
particularly for young
doing Nas
people,
bullshit.
opportunities that they see in front of them going forward. So if you can't control your job, you can't control your housing, you can't control your prospects, but you can control your gender. And by the way, if you start talking about it quite a lot, you're going to get attention, you're going to get positive reinforcement. If you do it on social media, you might become a mini celebrity in that world, etc. And it's all a distraction. So should we stop talking about it?
Well, we could, but the unfortunate thing is, it now
Yeah, I
has
mean, you could
practical-
just shut the fuck up. Like, you totally could do that. Go and build houses for poor 20-year-olds if you care about it that much.
consequences.
Right.
And so I think it did start off as something like a few people talking about it online, and it blew up.
What?
And then the shame of it all, the thing that killed it, is when the state got involved. So in 2004, when we made a legal fiction, which was basically to cover up the fact that we were homophobes and we didn't want gay people to marry, same-sex couples to marry, then we invented this GRA and this Gender Recognition Act, and the lovely David Lammy was instrumental.
What?
And Norman Tebbit said, are we really creating an act in which to marry fiction, which was basically to cover up the state got involved. So in 2004, when we made a legal fiction, which was basically to cover up the fact that we were homophobes and we didn't want gay people to marry, same-sex couples to marry, then we invented this GRA and this Gender Recognition Act, and the lovely David Lammy was instrumental. And Norman Tebbit said, are we really creating
I'm so
an act
confused.
in which women will be have XY chromosomes and men will have XX? This is a fiction. This is not true. And Anne Widdecombe, I think she also spoke against it. Conviction politicians, what happened to them? And so that's the bit that's ruined it. Because you can have fringe people that kind of think that gender is something ethereal and we can just do whatever we like, and isn't that great? And yeah, you know, people have always had crazy ideas. We just didn't have a state that stepped in and gone, oh yeah, that's right, let's teach it in schools.
I think the one part of
I just need to check again. Did she say that the GRA was enacted so that gay people could change their gender and then get married? Did she really just say that?
And men do
who cares?
Gender is something ethereal. We've had it in schools.
I mean, I wouldn't be
I think
surprised if she
the
believed
one
that.
part of your argument that people would really push back on is the autogynephile element of it. And you've used that word once. Number one,
Oh, jeez.
what does that actually mean?
Oh, fucking hell.
Okay, so it's the fetish of
This is going to be
embodying-
wild.
of having a vagina and embodying the body of a woman. So it's about literally wanting to be a woman or believing that you are. So you have a sexual fantasy and you're turned on by yourself as a woman.
Right, okay.
You look a bit sick. Come on.
Or excited, you never know.
Depends. I mean, there's new frontiers every day, Posie. So that being the case, right, to what extent
What's going
do you
on?
personally think that people identifying as a woman have this condition, and why do you think that?
So I think it's probably a really large number. So we used to call people,
let's
them
wait.
transsexuals
Let's
and
wait.
transvestites. And I think we knew that transvestites had a fetish. And they didn't often walk around the streets in their get-up. They often sort of kept it at home, you know, like where, I don't know, arguably that's where you should perform your kink. So we knew that this happened. We knew that there were issues with it, but these men used to meet in secret and it was all a bit shameful and taboo, which is also part of the excitement of being an autogynephile. And Grayson Perry will talk about it.
Risk is a big aphrodisiac, you know. And I mean, the first time I went out in my mum's clothes was very, very exciting, and I became addicted to that.
He'll talk about absolutely that sexual arousal is all part of his dress up. That's why he wears quite wide dresses. And he'll talk about that. That's not me saying that that's what he does. But now we have to pretend that that's not right, and it's stunning and brave. I think about 10% of all porn consumed is... I can't use they would use the word to describe it. So transsexual, or men who have male genitals but also have breast implants. That's
What?
quite high in porn. I talked to a mother, and her son had been booted out of a baseball team. And she said that he then sort of went in his room for a couple of years. He was absolutely gutted because it was American, and obviously in America these things are massive, aren't they? If you're part of like the first team, and unlike
What the
in
fuck
Britain,
is she
where I
talking
think if you're
about?
not in the first team, there's a second or a third. If you're not in the team, you're out. And he was really depressed. And then he said that he was a woman. He identified as a girl. And it transpired that he identified as a girl because he really enjoyed watching pornography featuring lesbians. And so he decided he wanted to be a lesbian. And so that would be the beginnings of what we would call autogynephilia.
Give me strength.
There's all
I don't
sorts
even
of
know if
reasons that
this
people
any of
have,
this warrants a
sexual
response.
fetishes.
Like, I don't even know what to say about any of this. In a way that somebody who holds her position would even, not just turn around and say that
Is there men that are obsessed with feet? I know one such man that's obsessed with feet, and that's because his mother mainly ignored him, but her friend used to kick him under the table.
What?
I think your sexual fetish, kind of the mechanics of it, can set before you're sort of 6, 7 years old. Again, Grace and Perry will
Okay,
talk
yeah.
about this. This is not something that I've made up. So I do think there's a high rate of autogynephilia. Debbie Hayton, for example, that you had on, has written about being an autogynephile.
Okay, well, that woman is like, shish. So, I mean, from my point of view, I think it's pretty normal to be turned on by the idea of finding yourself attractive. Like, that's a pretty normal experience for pretty much everybody, more or less. Like, when you frame it as this...
And that being the case, so where does gender dysphoria come from?
It's just a tool to other people. That's all it is. That's all it was invented for. That's all it's used for. There is no evidence that such a thing has any, meaningful impact or should even be considered in such a way. It's all just, again, it's just the ew, gross, it's a fetish, that's disgusting. It's all just the same argument reframed in a lot of different ways.
I don't know. I don't know that it does. I think if you had a powerful, women don't really have fetishes as much as men. I'm not saying
That is f***ing bullshit. You have outed yourself as a vanilla bitch.
none of us do, but generally speaking, we don't.
That's
we also don't have the same relationship with sex as men do. Many women have tried to pretend that we're the same as men, but we're really, really not. Our bodies are very, very different. The driver of sexual fetish and the power I think it can have over someone, if you look at murder, for example, that can sometimes be a sexual fetish. And so that will go from,
again,
as shown in Sarah
edge
Edward's
case.
murder,
What?
flashing, and it will just go up and it will just increase. And it's all to do with a sexual driver. Often serial killers are driven by sexual desires. And we know this. We know this. We know that there used to be all sorts of different inquiries into behaviour studies as to why people commit these crimes. We don't seem to want to look at that anymore.
I'm going to be honest with you. When we started
What the
the
fuck
show
are you
3.5
talking
years
about?
ago, I didn't think we'd be sitting talking about...
She hasn't said anything. She's just saying murder bad. Murder is often escalated to as a result of some kind of sexual desire to... So... What's going on?
Sorry.
What is going
It's not your
on?
fault. I'm like, how do we get here? This is so weird. Why? Like,
Yeah,
if
no
I
shit.
send this stuff to like my family back. Like my mum, I'm not even sure I can explain to my mum what I do for a living anymore. We are through the looking glass with this shit.
I know.
And I find it very confusing.
We live in a society.
At universities, official kink clubs,
What?
BDSM, official university. Is it Discord? So it'll be
Servers,
like,
yeah.
So,
Oh, wow, there's a Discord
BDSM,
group.
My son was sent out on Instagram. There was a post about sex work, being a sex worker as a student.
What?
Yeah.
So I just want this clarified because I'm suddenly feeling very old and very conservative. Sex work as in prostitution
Yeah.
or being a stripper or...
No, as in anything goes, anything. How to be safe and a sex worker.
Yeah, that's pretty important to know. Students are really poor. Like, I think it's pretty smart.
At uni, how to pay your way through uni, being a sex worker.
Yeah, people have been doing that forever. You do know that, right?
Do you think
Like,
the
literally
pendulum
forever.
is just overswung here, Kelly? The society was discriminatory against gay people. It
So
was
we've already gone
discriminatory
too
against
far.
women. And in the process of liberating all those groups and making sure they all had the same rights as everybody else, we kind of just went, you know what? Let's not have shame about anything. Let's say that everything is normal. Every human instinct
Yeah.
is to be celebrated. There's nothing wrong with anything. There's no
Nobody's-
right or wrong. That's moralistic
Literally
judgments,
nobody
and
is saying
we need
this.
to- everything is
You're just
relative, and it's all
making
about,
up people to
whatever.
argue against.
And we've just gone a little bit too far, and therefore we're going to have a correction back when the pendulum sort of slows and stops and then swings back.
What I fear is that we'll go so far into chaos that the only thing that will be able to bring us back
Chaos.
is a very prescriptive religion.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
Jesus
I
Christ.
do fear that it's like humans at the moment are all running around. Nobody knows what's morally okay. In
I mean, I have a pretty good idea. It seems to be you that doesn't.
the 1980s, single mothers were demonized.
Yeah.
Terrible. They're the sort of people that were left behind raising children. And they were supposed to feel a great deal of shame. And now you've got women in pajamas walking their kids to school, eating a packet of Frazzles for breakfast, with no shame whatsoever. And if you criticize those women, if you say, Jesus, like, how is that kid going to have any sort of life or whatever? You're like, oh, well, that's really shameful and shaming. But I bring it back, I say. Bring back shame.
Well, this is...
Oh my God. See, this is why I love Posie Parker, because she's just wild, I have a feeling that she probably is quite very ashamed of herself.
I mean, I said this the other day, like, the culture wars basically turning
She's just jealous that other people aren't as ashamed of themselves anymore.
a lot of normal people into these radical reactionaries, simply because quite a lot of us are just going, you've gone too far now.
Radical
some
reactionaries.
things ought not to be encouraged.
Like what?
And I mean,
Yeah.
you gave an example there, but single parenthood, whether it's mothers
Single parenthood shouldn't be encouraged? Why not? Literally, why not?
or fathers, to say that it's not going to lead to the best outcome, statistically speaking, now you're...
Yeah, but we could change society, help single mothers with childcare, and, like, give them money and stuff. It wouldn't solve everything, but it would massively increase the chances of positive outcomes for the children instead of just shaming them. Like, what the fuck is that gonna do?
You're shaming, whatever, slut shaming. Well, is it a good idea for women to have sex with hundreds of men and to treat sex the way men do, who are designed biologically very differently? Is it? Or should I mean,
Okay,
every
dude.
society prior to us has had some sort of restrictions around that to encourage
So do they just think that, like, women aren't horny and that they shouldn't be horny? I don't...
certain types.
I don't get
Do
it.
we throw all past learning out of the window?
I reckon. Apparently, that's where we're going. I think religion left.
I wonder how
and
far
the
back she
big
would like to
gaping
go.
void that it's left is being filled with narcissistic
I wonder which
desires.
period
I think
of
that's,
human
and I'm an
history
atheist,
she
I'm
would
a
like to
gold star
return to.
atheist. I've never believed in God at all. But I do think I'm very lucky to have been born in a country where the themes of Christian moral thinking were still running through our education system. Whereas now, it's really weird on the left, isn't
What?
it? Because they'll really go for Christians, but not other religions, which I would argue were maybe much more problematic than Christianity, much more prescriptive, much more sexist.
Well, I mean, first of all, because a lot of these people live in Christian countries, maybe? But even then, again, she's just lying. She's making shit up.
And it's really interesting. I made a comment.
She's talking about Mormonism.
Well, I made a comment the other night about, I think I might have even been talking about Afghanistan, and someone said something about they were American. They said something
yikes.
about their country was really bad on abortion, as if it was comparable. I was like, well, find me a Christian government that is controlling a country and stopping women from being able to have jobs, and I'm going to agree with you 100%. But America, well, it's a republic, but it's like a democratic republic, and they've decided in some places, I totally don't agree, but they've decided in some places that they don't want people to have access to abortion past a certain point. I don't think that is barbarism. I think they're totally wrong, and I think they need to win the argument properly in those places. But that is what democracy is about. It's not always about doing the things that are right or that you totally agree with. It's about the will of the people.
Democracy isn't about doing what's right. Oh, I agree with you.
To me, a large part of the problem comes from feminism itself.
Oh, here we go.
Anton,
Here
get
we
your-
fucking go.
Go on.
we tried to have this conversation last time, if you remember.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
And she called me an MRA,
Yeah.
pretty much.
That was my jokes.
But you look at a lot of what feminism should be standing up for is standing up for women. And they don't seem to be. Like you see what's happening in Afghanistan.
Maybe 30 years ago.
Where are the feminists up in arms about the treatment of women? Where are they commenting? You know,
True.
They will absolutely lambast, and I don't know enough about the issue, about what's happening in America, but they won't criticise Islam.
No, I know.
And you go, well, hang on a second. What, is it only
That's-
white women that you care about, or Western women?
Oh, no, there's cultural relativism. So if it's happening in another culture, then you can't comment. So if somebody's getting their genitals
true.
completely sliced off in
What
another
the
country, you shouldn't really talk about that.
Are you fucking serious? Are you insane? Posie Parker, are you insane? Do you really think that, like, no one on the left has anything to say about FGM? Have you, like... she's blowing my mind. She's wild.
I had a discussion with somebody the other day online, and she totally lost the argument, but it was very funny. So I was sort of trying to say, look, I know you don't agree with me. I really respect the fact that you'll talk, because I'm trying to understand why anybody would think it's all right for a child age 4 to call themselves the opposite sex. Like, where you think that goes, what do you think the harms are, blah, blah, blah. And she said, well, you know, different people make different life choices. In some countries, there's child marriage, but
What?
in some countries, there's child marriage.
Wait, let's go back. So, she very subtly went from FGM to a 4-year-old identifying as a gender other than that which was assigned to them.
And call themselves the opposite sex. Like, anybody would think, look, I know you don't agree with me. I really respect you, but it was very funny. The day online, shouldn't really talk about that. Getting their jumping in another culture, then you can't comment. So if somebody's getting their genitals completely sliced off in another country, you shouldn't really talk about that. I had
Not
a
true.
discussion with somebody the other day online, and she totally lost the argument, but it was very funny. So I was sort of trying to say, look, I know you don't agree with me. I really respect the fact that you'll talk, because I'm trying to understand why anybody would think it's all right for a child age 4 to call themselves the opposite sex. Like, where you think that goes, what do you think the harms are?
Saying sex instead of gender there on purpose
Blah, blah, blah. And she said, well,
because she thinks they're the same.
you know, different people make different life choices. In some countries, there's child marriage, but in some countries, there's child marriage. But, you know,
What does that have to do with anything? What? So, this imaginary person that she was arguing against was saying that children should be able to identify as whatever gender they want because somewhere else in the world there are children being forced to get married. This is a lie. She's literally lying. There's no way this is real. There's no way.
culturally, that's not okay here. And I was like, have you just said it's all right that there's child marriage? And she said, well, I'm just saying people make different choices. I went, what child has made that choice? I was like, look, you've lost the argument. Let's just move past that bit because I still wouldn't understand. But yeah, there are
I don't understand either.
people that talk in those terms. So do feminists care? Well, it depends what sort of feminists, but
Right.
do feminists care about Afghanistan? There have been some radical feminists, about 30 of them, who rescued quite a lot of women. And so I do think they care. It's a bit like Qatar with the football. Are they going to take the knee for all the slaves that died building the stadium? Will they take the knee there, or is
I
it
don't
historical
Qatar.
slavery that we need to care about? It's
But so
all this nonsense. Like there's people fishing for prawns in Thailand where what they do is they take a load of people and they'll chuck one person off right at the beginning of the trip, so everybody just does exactly as they're told.
what?
You know, there's modern slavery that totally dwarfs historical slavery, but nobody's talking about that. It's so.
You might have gone a bit far with that one. Like you had me at the start there, but now you're just going. You're just go and go.
Let's go back to the origins of feminism. Do I think feminism has a part to play? Yes, I probably do.
So when she says feminism, she means like second wave 70s feminism. That's where feminism's at in the UK, you know, among women her age.
I think there is something in the notion, even with second wave, that said men and women are the same. It's just the way we're socialized. So I inhabit this body. It's female. It's 5'1". I'd probably be a different person if I was 5'8". I'd probably be a different person if I had totally different facial features. You know, I think it's a mistake.
Yeah, it's such like an esoteric conclusion. Like, yeah, maybe. Like, what the f***? What does this have to do with anything real? Just imagining a universe where what?
To try and say that nothing.
I mean, I get what she's saying. Like, the way you're treated by people obviously affects the way you grow up and the person you become. But, like, where's she going
do with
this?
our biology, which then would lead you to the female brain. But also, I have this feeling about instinct. And it comes back to the fact that I think I'm informed not just by my own experiences, but by the experience and legacy of people that have come before me. And not in some weird kind of sense, not in that past life kind of proper memory, but in the way that humans know.
And so what she's not saying is that it stops at her. Everyone after her that thinks differently to her can f*** off. She doesn't care. She doesn't want to hear it. She only wants to, you know, talk about and listen to people that she already agrees with.
To clench their fists.
She has no interest in reasonable, honest conversation like you said at the start.
When they're tiny babies, you know, if you do that to a baby, they'll clench their fist. These little puppies I've got at home at the moment, they basically swim around and they know how to root to make sure that they can feed. And so to say that we're not born with other legacy of behaviours that may be directly correlated with our sex, I don't think that's like the most preposterous idea I've ever had.
Nobody says that that's not true. Like, people, like, what? Yeah, yeah, like, brain chemistry plays it is behavior. Behavior, like, what?
No, I don't think
What's
it is.
going on?
And I don't want to be in this place. I don't want to be this person going,
I don't want to be here either.
yeah, we need to go, or whatever. But here's another question, which is difficult for, I think, for feminism, and you're not part of that movement. But what
So she's not a feminist? Well, I mean, I could have told you that, but...
about gender stereotypes, right? Because how much of that is biological, right? How much of that ought to be encouraged to facilitate a normal quote-unquote woman or a normal quote-unquote man function?
So, I mean, yeah, hormones have an effect on behavior. Nobody's saying they don't. But it doesn't mean that it should be okay for men to just go around fist fighting people for no reason. Like, is that what you want? Do people just have no, like, moral boundaries and to just always be expressing their, like, baser urges with no, like, higher brain function? I mean, none of these people have high brain functions, but...
in society, because if you encourage men to behave in ways that are suitable for men in the society that you exist, you're making their life easier, right?
Simpler, not easier, because men also suffer and are oppressed under patriarchy. Like, that's the nature of... It's just how it is.
If you encourage women to behave in ways that help them navigate the society that we live in, well, you are indoctrinating them with certain ideas about right and wrong and how do you behave and what you wear sometimes and all of that.
So you just mean be docile and do what the man tells you, otherwise he'll punch you in the face.
Stuff. Do we throw all of that out of the window, or do we need a bit of that? That's the
don't
question,
know.
isn't it?
Well, I'm a heterosexual woman, so I quite like to be, well, I don't know if I do that anymore, but I quite like to be attracted to the opposite sex. And to say...
Okay. Why is she saying that like it's a weird thing? Like it's bad? Like, are you ashamed, girl? Why are you ashamed?
There's loads of modern things that people say is a proof that they're men and women and it's biological, but loads of the things
Like
that they
what?
would use to prove that, then they can't be biological because
Like what?
years and years ago, those things didn't exist.
They can't, so science isn't real because it's new. What's going on?
But do I think my husband and I are fundamentally different? Yes. My hypothalamus, when I was pregnant with babies and then had a baby, if my baby woke up in the middle of the night, I woke up before my baby. Before I could hear my baby, I was awake because I'm somehow connected. Because I don't know, I'm a mammal that's supposed to keep their baby
whatever.
alive. And my husband's role,
What the
he
fuck
always
does that?
felt,
Maybe it was just kicking you in the bladder.
was not just to care for our children, but to make sure I was all right so I could care for our children, which makes me a trad wife. And a
In
very
short
happy
supply
one.
and in high demand.
I know, it's so weird.
Jesus Christ.
But he also is we are in a very
Yikes.
fortuitous position that I could stay home and look after my children, which is not something that many women can do. And
So all that stuff you were saying about not being able to afford a house, was that a lie? Were you just lying? Were you just deflecting? Were you just saying, oh, I wish I didn't have to care about this, but they've made it such a big issue that I can't even care about the things I want to care about that don't affect me anyway. What?
I like to see more women have a genuine choice to do that if they wish. I don't see the reason that we should send a woman back to Tesco's to sack shelves, to pay somebody else crappy wages to look after her child while she earns crappy wages. I think the government should pay women to stay at home, or tax break somehow, something.
Yeah, that would be sick.
I certainly don't want this.
it. Pay everyone.
Any more involved than it is. I'm a little
Posie,
bit
what I'm
different.
getting
Go
at,
on, go on.
What I'm getting at is, if we're talking about sort of like the pendulum not swinging too far, I wonder whether an element of gender stereotype teaching children, well, you're a boy, this is what you do. You're a girl, this is how you behave, right? I mean, is that entirely not wrong and evil and useless? I mean, give you an example, right? Boys don't cry, right? And we now talk about how, oh, men are all, they've got all these feelings that they're not letting. I don't know that it's good for men to be letting out all their feelings.
What? Okay. Okay. What the Like, is he about, like, what the like, actually, what the are they gonna talk about incels?
I don't know that society responds to men letting out all their feelings in
Well, I mean, he's not wrong that a lot of a lot of feminists don't want to hear and have to like do emotional labor to support men expressing their emotions because they themselves feel so hurt. But that's a whole thing. I'm actually writing a video about incels right now. It's gonna be very long.
a way that makes it a good idea for men to do that.
It's gonna be very transgressive.
Know that men's biology is necessarily geared towards that way of releasing emotion. Men do different things to deal with and
So again, just punch someone in the face if you feel sad. Just punch someone in the face.
process emotion.
That's what he's saying.
The idea that you talked about this, that we're all the same, I don't know that we're all the same even on that level, even on the level of cultural teaching of how you behave and how you behave. Is that, you know, because as you say, there was a point where feminism was advocating, well, that's all just wrong and bad, and we just need to, everyone's a blank slate. Are we?
Oh, God, I don't know. I like to think that my kids were allowed to play with whatever they wanted.
I highly doubt it.
My daughter's probably the least likely to have cried up to the age of about 7. Well, even now.
Remember, she doesn't think that children are people. She doesn't think that children should be allowed to have autonomy or like their own agency.
Now. And I don't cry very much either.
I don't imagine you do.
I'm a little bit, I do angry. But I just don't cry very much. And I don't know if anybody should be crying a lot, to be honest. I
Why?
do think that the light and shade of male and female, I think it complements.
Yeah.
You know, my husband couldn't fall apart when I just had a baby. I probably had to fall apart a little bit when I just had a baby because I was very, very, very tired. And so he needed to be strong. There have been times when he's had like a couple of issues or whatever, but
You know,
it
whatever.
wouldn't be particularly attractive, would it, if he sat at the
Are you kidding?
kitchen table crying every day?
Having a breakdown. It just, that's my point. And I
What?
I'm not supposed
What
to have
point?
said that, obviously.
I hate being the guy who's like, actually, things were... I don't want to be in this position.
Actually, things were better in the past for men.
But on the other hand, like I said, the entirety of the culture war can be summed up by that meme where you've got like a normal person and one of these like pink-haired weirdos. And the pink-haired weirdo says to the normal person, who radicalized you? And the normal person says, you. Right? To me, that is the entire point. There's the entire core of the culture war. It's normal people having this shit pushed on them that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work. It's not connected to reality. It's impractical. And it's hurting people.
The backlash is not going to be nice.
And that's my worry.
When do you
Wait,
think that's gonna
is that a threat?
Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't work. It's not connected to reality. It's impractical. And it's hurting people.
The backlash is not going to be nice.
And that's my worry.
When do you think that's going to happen? And what is it going to look like?
Well, I think we saw it a little bit in the football stadium, didn't we? When
yeah.
they started, like, no, we're not going to have you kneeling. Like, we're not racist.
What?
We've solved.
So you're you're aligning yourself with the racists.
That
It makes sense.
like, so I mean, maybe there still is racism in football. I don't go to
Are you fucking serious?
football matches. I don't know, but I can't imagine that too many people
This
have much
person is
tolerance
amazing.
for racial abuse in the stands.
If like me, you don't really care about soccer, you might not know, but English football fans, what the did I say soccer? English football fans are world renowned for being like just the biggest pieces of shit everywhere they go. They're just the worst. Like a couple of years ago, a group of football fans like beat the shit out of some black guy on a Paris subway. It just happens all the time. They're just literally just the worst. Again, because it's a whole culture of people where they're not allowed to feel and express their feelings, and the only ways they are allowed to express their emotions is by going around and punching each other in the face. So
I think it's coming. I think people are really beginning to have enough. But I think it's going to get so much worse before that backlash comes. And I think
So
people will
she's
start
threatening
joining.
us.
People will start all the things that we're supposed to fear. We're supposed to think the biggest threat in this country is the far right. I mean, I've yet to really see them for these remarkably visible, powerful men that are patrolling our streets. I don't think that is the biggest threat to this country. I think the biggest threat is lies and dishonesty and a lack of reality, or a lack of, like, people basically are throwing water in your face and going, you're completely dry. What are you talking about? Like wiping
What?
water.
Do you think that this is going to be the issue that breaks a whole culture war?
What, the trans stuff? Possibly, because it is just in your face untrue. Like, as a white person,
Here we go.
I probably can't speak to what levels of racism really happen on a daily basis.
Wow, that's literally the smartest thing she's ever said in her life, and one of the only honest things she's said.
Because it's very likely that I'm not going to see them and I'm not going to hear them. So somebody could have 2 points of view, and they could both be telling exactly what is happening in their lives, and they could be polar opposites, but both would be true.
Yeah.
Men can be women, women can be men. It's either true or it's not true. There are no points of view. There's no 2 points of view on that where both people are telling the truth. And I think that's the fun.
Because you're like totally mischaracterizing the whole like gender identity and someone's experience of racism. How are these comparable? Like, I don't. Then they're not the same thing. You can't make that comparison.
Any of the other cancelling culture war stuff going on.
And where do you stand on this whole idea that sex and gender are separate? That sex is one thing and gender is another altogether?
Well, I think gender is a big fat mistake to even bring it into the world, even to give birth to that word.
So she's a gender abolitionist? Sick. I mean, of course she's not.
It just is the beginning of such a load of nonsense. So I think there is biological sex, and I think there are stereotypes, and I think there are sex roles, and I think there are lots of things associated with me being female.
Yeah, that's called gender.
And you guys being male.
That's called gender.
The idea that
there is sex, and then there is the sociological experiences and behaviors, which we collectively have termed gender.
Gender exists somewhere that isn't dependent on those things is a stupid.
Well,
stupid argument.
Well, let's not go deep into the theory, because I don't think it would be worth it.
Made up by feminists. Made up by some people in universities. Made up where that isn't dependent on those things is a stupid argument made up by feminists. Made up.
So feminists invented gender identity so that men could say they identify as women and then assault you in bathrooms. I think I'm getting it.
By some people in universities, but
Lovely.
feminist theory that
Anti-intellectualism,
sort of
we
started
love to
talking
see
about
it.
that. So you could basically take a person's, I don't know, what is it? I mean, it's kind of religious, isn't it? It's so one of my kids was saying the other day. One of my kids said the other day about somebody who identified, and I said, well, you either have to believe two things. You either have to believe that gender is some unquantifiable, metaphysical, non-existent, can't touch it.
No, that's not what gender means.
Thing that exists in every human, like a soul. Or you have to believe that the code of DNA did every single bit right, that did my female body right.
Okay.
And then when it got to my brain, it went,
Okay, girl.
oh, I think I'm just going to put a male one here, and then builds the rest of my body around it. Those two things are the only...
So the whole, like, male-female soul, male-female brain, there is, like, almost no evidence to show that that's even a real thing. And what evidence there is so slight that it's as yet to be deemed statistically significant. We're talking about, like, the density of, like, clusters of nerves in one very specific part of the brain.
that make gender a remotely possible thing, and I think both are nonsense.
And that's going to trigger a few people.
It's such a weird place that we're in. I don't really know what to say. I just find it all incredibly weird. And I see these discussions, and Mumsnet love to talk about us and us having these conversations, and they get this and they don't get this, and are they allies? I don't care. I care about the truth. I care about the truth, right? And the truth is, just because you uttered an incantation, that does not change who you are biologically. It fucking doesn't. It doesn't, right? And it doesn't make me an ally or an enemy or anything. And it doesn't mean that I don't care about people and I'm not compassionate towards them and I don't want them to be included in as much as they can be.
Just lying. Just say it, dude. Just say the thing. Say the thing that you feel.
I just don't want to
Just stop being a coward.
lie. I don't want to lie. And I think a lot of people are starting to feel that way, that increasingly living in society now requires you to lie on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And to accept things that you shouldn't have to accept, you know? It's very frustrating because I really don't want to be in this position.
So nearly.
No.
I like to think of myself as this, hey, everybody do what you want. I'm liberal. You know, in the actual meaning of the word liberal, right?
Bullshit. Absolutely.
Well, apparently I'm not anymore. You know, I'm a bigot just like you.
I don't think you ever were, mate.
Liberal. I think they're the bigots, aren't they? To insist to enforce an ideology on somebody is pretty crappy. I mean, like the euphemism goes even through to what is a mother. Now we've got the rise of surrogacy, as if that's a gay human right. And gay men in surrogacy circles are just called infertile because two men can't have a baby together, so they're now called infertile. No, they're just men. And so surrogacy is massively on the uprise, and the changing of language in those laws is frightening as hell. Where they
laws are being
even in the
changed.
trans thing, they call people young people. They don't call them children.
Right.
And
What
so
the fuck
just
are you
that little
talking about?
switcheroo, you're a teacher. Were a teacher. But just even that little switch of talking about young people instead of children, I think totally changes the way we can talk about
It's not
young
true.
people, children, agency. You can't say child has agency and autonomy to make these decisions and consent. As soon as you say something like,
Yeah, she literally doesn't believe that children should have autonomy and that they don't have agency. After Bell v. Tavistock was overturned by appeal, you literally said that the next thing you were going to go after was Gillett competency, which is like one of the very few pieces of informed consent legislation that we have in the UK, which basically just says that, you know, children who are educated and informed on a certain medical procedure, whatever it might be, you know, if they are to give consent, then they have to, you know, have some kind of level of knowledge about it. So she wants to take away the rights of people under the age of 16 to consent to medical treatment. And it's also applied in other places as well as medicine, but it's mostly like a medical treatment thing.
a child can consent. You're just really on a quick direct line to any of the famous paedophiles we could think about.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. There it is, everybody. She said the thing.
Right.
I mean,
Absolutely.
how long was it really going to
Absolutely.
be?
It's like if children can
Absolutely.
consent to taking a vaccine against their parents' wishes, if they consent to taking puberty blockers, what else are they going to be able to consent to very soon?
Are you serious? What? I mean, like, the age of consent in this country is already way too low. And he's saying that if children are allowed to consent to medical procedure, that... What? I mean, the real f***ed up thing is that the people in charge are definitely pedophiles. We still have a royal family. Isn't that interesting?
All right, look, we haven't had enough conflict in this one.
The
go on.
last thing...
Insult Posie, go on.
Yeah, no. The one... I'm a feminist. No, the one question...
You're the worst.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I am the
I was
worst.
going to say he's going to grab you after this. But don't do that.
No, absolutely not. I'm not left-wing. Right, okay, so... here's
What?
The thing. What does that say about...
What the f*** does that mean?
that? What does that say... What does this conversation say about us as a society as a whole?
Here we are. Society's collapsing.
God. I think it says that we are divorcing really quickly from reality. Really quickly. And I think it's quite dangerous. All the tangible places you could have a nice foothold, they're disappearing. So biological sex, what parentage might be.
Nobody's saying these things aren't real.
It's all this surface level wants and desires have replaced rights and
What?
concrete things that we need to sustain. Like most
what?
people spend a lot of their time on their phones, not talking to people in real
Oh my God, girl. Oh, jeez.
life. I think the pandemic probably exacerbated that somewhat. I've hardly heard anybody talk about how horrific it must have been for elderly people. I mean, it's bad enough for
Are
anybody.
you
being on their own,
serious?
but for some
You're
people,
just
they
a
might have
liar.
spent 18 months of their last 2 years.
Literally a
of life
liar. What do you mean you
barely
haven't?
seeing anybody or having a conversation on a daily basis.
You're a
And I
fucking
think that
liar.
is something that is worth
Either you're a
talking about.
liar or you don't watch TV and you don't have the internet. Those are the only two explanations. You are a liar. You are lying. You are a liar.
Rather than someone's identity. So I don't know. We need to get back to real, tangible, consequence-led sort of society where you can genuinely affect change.
I mean, if you're actually interested in preferable outcomes, you could, read. Do some real research instead of just being
In your own life.
disgusted.
I think we've got to a point where in order to be someone, you just have to say something. Whereas it used to be that you'd had to do something. You'd have to really do something to be someone. That's what people wanted to do. They, even if it was to be the best plumber that anybody had ever come across, or write a novel, or climb a mountain, or whatever it is. But now you just have to come out. Oh, I'm genderqueer. What does that mean? It means once I had a blue fringe. That's the be-all and
I mean,
end-all of my
I did have
identity.
blue hair
That's
when I was
all I've ever
14.
done. Aren't you stunning and brave? Oh, God, you're amazing.
And on that,
I mean, the irony is the reason why people say shit like that is so brave and so amazing is because the world is filled with hateful, disgusting people like her who want to do everything they can to make life as hard as possible for people that don't fit her tradcon, image of life.
no, Posie, thank you so much for coming on the show. The one question we always finish before we do our questions for locals is, what's the one thing we're not talking about, but we really should be?
Well, I think in the light of the Sarah Everard
Oh, here we go.
murder, I think we really do need to talk about what serving police officers actually get away with, and why something like indecent exposure, which I'm
Yeah,
not even going to say his name, which the murdering, rapist, evil crap man, he committed in 2015, and how he managed to keep his job.
yeah, true. Police are pieces of shit. We should probably do something about that. Maybe if you would drop this whole thing you've got going on and you could do something about it. You saying you care so much.
So I think we need to look at what's called low-level sexual assault, and how we used to know that can be the first step in some really serious crimes.
It's a very important point. Kelly,
And it's
thank you
not
so
in
much for coming back.
dispute.
We're going to do a couple of questions for locals. Before we
Okay.
do, where are you not yet banned from online that people...
Yeah,
Look
fuck
at
off.
all of our
Thanks if you like this one.
Triggernometry.
Okay, fantastic. Wasn't that incredible? Yeah, so this is the kind of people that we have over here. And she's one of the more well-known ones, I guess.
So we could be there. We could be where America is, where they slice.
Fantastic. Just amazing. Hell.